I want to welcome everyone to the second public meeting of the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Working Group. My name is Dave Zomak. I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. I want to make sure, first and foremost, that everybody's at the right meeting. There's another interesting meeting happening at Bang Center. It has to do with the town's housing production plan. So I want to right out of the gate make sure that everyone's in the right meeting. You're here for the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Working Group public meeting and not the housing production plan. That meeting is taking place over at the Bang Center. So if anybody wants to hear about that plan, that meeting is going on as well. So with that, I'd like to thank, if I could, it's a little hard to compete over talking in the back. If I could ask for your cooperation, thank you. I want to thank the working group for being here for their second meeting of the day. Actually, we met from 3 to 5 in this very room, another public meeting. So I appreciate you devoting most of your afternoon and evening to this important work. I also want to thank the public for coming. We had a very productive public meeting some weeks ago where we took a lot of important input from you, and tonight I suspect that most of you are here for that purpose to interact with the working group and also to provide us with some of your input on the draft regulations. I would call your attention to the back table, which includes all of the handouts we're currently working from, the most important of which I think are the draft regulations that are dated 3/1. Those documents are, all of these documents are also available on our website, the town website. Under the living section, there's a very active and up-to-date page there with the packet information. So if you don't get something tonight or you have questions about something, please refer to that page and you can see all of the agendas, all of our summary notes, and any handouts or input we've gotten from the public. They're all there. Any email I get or staff gets or the working group gets is shared with the entire working group and with you. So I would encourage you to look there for reference. Again, the most important document is 3/1. I think many of you will want to comment on that 3/1 document is my guess. John Thompson, our code enforcement officer, will be working with us and putting tonight and putting that document up on the screen behind me. If there's questions about a particular section, we'll do the very best we can to answer those. There's also a new handout. There's a new handout since 5 p.m. this evening. It is entitled Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Working Group Status Overview 3.5. This is something that Stephanie O'Keefe to my left will be addressing in a few minutes. So just to lay out a couple of the ground rules, if you will, tonight, we hope to hear from as many people as would like to speak. I would ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. I will be timing them roughly and try to wrap you up at the end of 3 minutes. The working group will try as best we can to give you some feedback if we have it. If we don't have it tonight, we'll note your comments. John will also be noting all of your comments for the record so that we can take that information and incorporate it into our deliberations moving forward. As you know, the context here is we are moving towards Springtown meeting. I'm going to turn it over to our town manager in a minute to talk about his charge to this group. We have another meeting set up for 3/12 next Tuesday from 3 to 5, and we hope that we are nearing completion on a document. We've still got quite a ways to go, but the working group is committed to making a recommendation to the town manager, and with that, I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you, Dave, and I want to first thank all of you for coming. And I think, I have to say, when was considering putting together a broad-based work group to look at rental issues, rental regulations, there were more than a few skeptics about how doable is this. I think it's fair to say, and today was a good illustration of it, the most recent meeting, this is an iterative process, as are the processes laid out in the evolving draft regulations that the work group is working on. It's meant to make improvements to how rental properties are regulated in this community, and do so in very practical, achievable, and fair ways. The draft set of recommendations is very, very different from an initial draft of even just 5-6 weeks ago, and that's a direct reflection of the hard work of this work group, who I want to thank again for their commitment to this effort and their very thoughtful input, and to each of you for offering and continuing to offer input to come up with something that's practical and doable. And so I'm looking forward to hearing more feedback tonight, and looking forward to the next several weeks, and ideally being able to come into town meeting in May with a very solid proposal for town meeting to consider. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Stephanie, I think you wanted to make some comments and introduce us to your document.
Thank you. So I see many people here have been attending our meetings, so this will not be news to you, but to some of you who are here for the first time, just kind of want to give you a snapshot of where we are right now. As Dave mentioned, all of the materials that we've been working with every single week are available on the website, so I'm not going to rehash those, but just so you know where we are at this kind of snapshot in time. This has been and I'm working from the status overview document that Dave referenced. This has been an incredibly deliberative process. We have been meeting for 2 hours nearly every week since early November or something. The time all runs together. But we were tasked with really an enormous task in a very short amount of time. So the group has been working very hard, putting in many hours to try and determine very clearly what our intents are here. What are the problems that we're trying to solve, and how do we want to do that? So we did have a very deliberative process of establishing why we're doing this, what we're looking for compliant properties to be, and how the regulations would address that. At this point, we have strong support, not unanimous support, certainly not unanimous among every member of this group, to do this, to shape these regulations as a permit system. And the key concept that you hear repeated at this meeting over and over again is we're looking for a permit that is easy to get and difficult to lose. And in fact, the only way we have identified through considerable consultation with town council this afternoon, really very wide-reaching, is that the only way to lose a permit would be through egregious acts on behalf of the landlord. We called this, or I called this in the earlier meeting, the nuclear option. In those very limited cases where repeated fines for violations and the court process, the court process would be part of the whole system, whether that falls before or after suspension still remains to be seen. But in certain truly egregious circumstances, we would have a suspension option for the rental permit based on egregious acts of the landlord. And I just want to emphasize that would not be based on tenant behavior. All of our information from town council so far is that there is a degree at which you cannot hold the landlord responsible for the tenant behavior. So I want to be very clear about that. So that's kind of in a nutshell where the group is. But because you wouldn't have had a chance, most of you, to read through the 7 pages, I think there's 7 pages right now of regulation, down from, 14 or more at earlier points. I just want to give you a general sense of what we're talking about with these regulations. In a nutshell, it's the question of what does it take to get a permit? Essentially, what is it to be compliant with the regulations we've created? And it boils down to 3 documents. That is a rental registration form and a self-inspection checklist. I won't go through all of the details that are already listed on your sheet, but basically it's collecting contact information, and after that it is self-attestation by the landlord that the property meets health and safety, basic health and safety elements, that it attests to the upkeep of the property, understanding the existing property maintenance laws that are on the books. behavior, that it attests to understanding that residents have to be compliant with existing behavior codes. Those are the nuisance, house, noise, alcohol bylaws that are on the books, and that the landlord will have provided those to the tenants. We are not saying that the landlord has to make sure that the tenants comply, but rather that the landlord understands the importance of compliance and has made that clear also to the tenants. We are for access. We are asking that the landlords attest to recognizing the importance of securing access to the premises when there is a complaint or a violation alleged. The landlord, we understand, cannot provide or guarantee that access, but the landlord is attesting to understanding and trying to facilitate that access for the code inspectors. Occupancy, attesting to understanding and complying with, to the best of the landlord's ability, and making clear to the tenants that the town has a bylaw limiting occupancy to 4 unrelated persons. The group was originally charged with considering whether that should be changed in any way. Early on, we decided that was really more complicated than this group could do. So at this point, 4 unrelated persons is the law of the land, and the landlords are being asked to attest to and make clear to their tenants that that is, in fact, the requirement. Additionally, we might require lease language attesting to things like that where leases are used. So those elements cover 2 documents, the registration and the self-inspection checklist, emphasizing that this is self-inspections. We would not be requiring inspections of the property by a code enforcement official in order to qualify for a permit. You, as the landlord, would merely be saying, yes, my property complies to these basic health and safety requirements as the checklist would require. Inspections would still take place in the case of investigating violations or complaints. The third document that it would take to qualify for the permit is a parking plan. And that would be a parking plan that would need to be approved by the building commissioner. And at this point, our details are that you would either comply, you would have approved your existing driveway situation, or if you wanted to expand your parking beyond the driveway, you would need to follow the zoning bylaw details for creating new parking on paved surfaces. Key provisions are that parking would be prohibited on grass or dirt. Another key provision is that we have established there would not be a minimum number of parking spaces required. So you could have a house with a small driveway that only qualifies for 2 legal parking spots. That's just for example. We are not requiring that parking be required for every possible tenant. We're saying, you know what, in some cases, your situation is just that there's only 2 cars could fit here. Now, if you wanted to expand that, then you've got the option of going through the requirements and design standards as specified in the zoning bylaw. We have not yet determined if there would be a maximum limit on parking spaces. That is still to be determined. So that is essentially where we are right now. Penalties for noncompliance would include the fines and the court process, and as I mentioned earlier, the potential for permit suspension in the case of very egregious acts by the landlord, not that are outside of the landlord's ability to control. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody had just a sense, because often what we hear in public comment is, this is so complicated, you know, this is so onerous, and I just want to make clear, you might still think that this is complicated, but I think the standard we talk about, we've mentioned several times in these meetings, is what reasonable people can agree is reasonable. So that packet that's currently 7 pages and is probably going to get to be a little bit longer in places and shorter in other places, it doesn't include every element that it needs to include yet, but that boils down to requiring of the landlords the things I mentioned, basically 3 documents. So we are very happy to hear your input on all of this so far. We still have opportunity to make tweaks and changes. We are trying to get into the home stretch here, but this is where we are, so look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephanie and John. Thank you. Are there any comments before we look to the public? Are there any comments from the working group? Anything anyone would like to share? No? Okay, before we get going, I do just want to make sure, and again, John is going to help us out, He may be switching back between documents if there are questions about documents. Really, the two we're talking about are the one that is on the board right now, which is the 3-1 draft, which Stephanie referenced, is about 7 pages long, down from many more pages some weeks ago. So the working group has really sharpened their pencil with assistance from staff and legal counsel. And then the other is the self-certification checklist, which is a one-pager that is on the back table if you don't have it. Very simple document. Stephanie referenced the application form, which I don't think we've really drafted, but that would be a very simple document with name, address. We can have that ready in a week or so, but it's a very simple document. So these are the two that we hope you will focus your comments on, and we look forward to hearing from you. If you would just, I'll call on you, and if you could come up, just tell us your name and provide us with your feedback. And if there are questions in your statement, we'll give it our very best shot to answer those, and I'll call on one of the working group members to see if they can answer that. So why don't we get started with the first hand? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Jacob Lefton. I'm a tenant here in Amherst, and I had the chance to read this on Sunday. And I think that this is a rather misguided attempt at regulating rental properties in Amherst. First of all, I don't believe that there are any tenants who are represented on this working group, which means that there's something like 7,000 residences and maybe 20,000 people who are unrepresented, who pay rent. I mean, there are landlords who are represented, but that doesn't represent the interests of the tenants. I think the rental regulations, from requiring licenses to paving requirements to extra compliance rules, they're going to create extra costs for landlords, which will invariably be passed down to renters. It's kind of a little bit of a regressive tax on lower income residents and students. I think the town should take steps to make targeted tools to focus on unhealthy and disruptive renters rather than punish thousands of renters for the unruly behavior of just a few individuals on a couple of targeted streets where, say, parking is out of control. What happens if renters if the landlord's license is revoked? We rely on the ability to renew our leases for stability in life and work and education, and I understand that this is a process that would be held until the lease is up, but what happens to the people who get displaced in that case? Most of the provisions and enforcement abilities in this legislation, it seems to me that they should be already covered by federal and state landlord-tenant law, or they can be taken up by and enforced by the zoning board. And I think that this regulation will create an unnecessary fee bureaucracy in Amherst, adding extra people whose job is to make sure they collect fees from landlords. And I don't necessarily think this is a good idea for the town. The law seems to only cover rental properties and not homeowners, and it's therefore selectively enforcing occupancy rules, which I think creates a second-class citizenry among tenants. And homeowners are not held to the same standards, which is a little bit unfair to me. I planned to attend the meeting this afternoon, but I was informed that the scheduled comment period was canceled. That hurts those of us who have to shift our schedules around to try to be active with you guys in government. So if you're gonna advertise a scheduled public comment session, please continue to hold it. And I just need to say that I don't believe that these regulations are fair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Louis Greenbaum, Precinct 1. I am gratified that amid the disagreements, we can all agree, landlords and tenants, that making Amherst healthy and safe is a worthwhile endeavor. But I am troubled that a good number of tenants currently being served in Amherst are assured of neither of these. I'm talking about tenants living in owner-occupied units where the safeguarding principles of the current plan do not extend because they are exempt. And yet all the moms and pops out there who are landlords, regardless of what they may call themselves, are in the same way that all the other landlords bound by the new regulations. We might ask how many tenants are living in illegal basements and attics where the state sanitary code and the building codes and regulations of state and town are not being honored. How many of these landlords know the law? And how many practice it? These laws are mandatory, governing kitchens, bathrooms, bedrooms, windows, and exits. Are they being respected for the safety of tenants? And what about parking? How many owner-occupied homes have cars on the lawns? It is doubtful that if units were brought before these landlords, any judge would discriminate in their favor. Let me see if I'm saying that right. It is doubtful that if suits were brought against these landlords, any judge would discriminate in their favor, as the town of Amherst now proposes. And what happens if owner-occupied landlords ask for the last month's rent and security deposits, as they are entitled to do? Do they respect the severe laws of triple damages, which rightfully protect the integrity and the disposition of these deposits? If the town is really serious applying health and safety standards, they must be uniform and equally applied. Every unit needs to be registered. Every landlord must know and practice the standards laid down by law, and every tenant must enjoy the assurance that his or her home is safe and legal. To exempt owner-occupied units from the proposed changes is arbitrary and discriminatory, and jeopardizes the welfare and the safety of our fellow citizens.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greenbaum. If I could I look to someone on the group to just speak to the conversation we've been having about exemptions and whether the regulation would cover all rental units in town is a bit fluid. Could Rob or Jonathan tell us where, kind of where we are on that right now? Just because I know Mr. Greenbaum brought that up in
Language in the current draft reflects where the working group is right now. There are discussions about whether or not we could have, right now would be required is both registration of all units and rental permits, except for those exempted. We are looking at the possibility of requiring registration of all units, period, and exempting none except those who are exempt under state or federal law, but only requiring permits in certain circumstances. So that alternative is out there and still under discussion.
Would I clarify that slightly a little bit more by also saying that at this afternoon's meeting we talked about the permit being applicable to the property, so that if owner A owns a property with 16 units in it, there potentially, if the working group found this something they wanted to explore, there could be a permit for the property, and on the self-certification they could put units 1 through 16 and certify those 16 units. So that's something we're looking into, and I imagine will come up at next Tuesday's meeting. So let me jump around. Yes, sir.
John Edwards, Precinct 9. I would just like to concur with what Louis said. There's a huge misconception. Many people all over the world, but certainly in college towns, have boarders. And people, I think, like to fondly refer to people as boarders as a little bit more genteel, and they don't have to think of themselves as landlords and perhaps these boarders as tenants. But Massachusetts landlord-tenant law does not differentiate one iota. Even if you are supplying linens and towels and you clean the room on a weekly basis, the moment you take money for renting a room, you are a landlord. You have no heightened rights. This person you rent to could be horrible to you, and you're going to have to take every step that any landlord has to get rid of them. So I strongly urge, if anybody's renting, if it's one room, you need a permit and you need to register, because there's absolutely no distinction in the law at all. And that's a huge surprise to people, because everybody rightfully considers their home their castle. But there's no heightened rights because it's your home, not one. So if we're gonna do this, it has to be absolutely across the board. So if you rent, you register.
Thank you very much. Yes, other hands? Yes, Mr. O'Connor?
Vince O'Connor, Precinct 1 Town Meeting member. I've lived here almost 40 years, and I've been a tenant the entire time I've lived here. I want to echo the comment of the gentleman who spoke, who opened the discussion. This is not a broad-based committee. You may declare it to be, but there, at least half the people here are town officials or town employees. We have landlord representatives, we have a few homeowners, and we have no tenants or students in a town which is the majority of whom are tenants and students. So this is not a broad-based committee. And what you proposed reflects that. I think that you need to be more specific about the town's responsibility to provide information both online and by mailing to landlords and tenants, so that they know about the conditions of rental housing. That'd be very easy to do. You could put the landlord-tenant booklet online every year, revised as of August 1st. You could send out a very small synopsis, a one-page thing in between September 10th and 20th, so that it would impact everybody. And that's how you could take care of the conditions issue, which I don't think is the big problem that's brought all of us here. The parking regulations are thankfully have been reduced in accordance with the comments of the chair of the select board, which I think all of us appreciated last Tuesday. And the only thing I would say is that no town official ought to be able to waive Part B, which is the requirement that if you want to add additional parking, that you have to go through the zoning bylaw requirements. That should not be waivable by the code enforcement officer, the building inspector, or anybody else. But the permit problem, I think, is we need a permit system for owners and for managers, not just for properties. And there needs to be a multi-step process by which if your tenants misbehave continuously. In the last year, we have had gatherings at townhouse apartments of 500, 1,000, and 2,000 people. That is not just a tenant problem. That is a management problem. And one of the recourses the town ought to have is to say, after a significant number of those kind of events, we should be able to require that you have on-site management people, that the condo association has to give up one of its units and the other owners have to compensate them, and one of those units has to be an on-site manager. And then if the activities continue, we require another one. And then finally, we require that the management people who act on behalf of the condominium owners either be eliminated, fired, or the Board of Health will shut the entire complex down, because we cannot tolerate the kind of gatherings that have happened at that place and other locations in town, and this permit system should not tolerate it. Notwithstanding, those things are going beyond public nuisance. Finally, I think that this foreign-related bylaw thing, some of these gatherings and some of the alcohol selling activities are the direct result of the lack of management oversight. People who are paid 10% of the rental income to manage the property who never show up. If we can have major universities that send out people from the Dean of Students office every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights to all the problem rental areas and knock on doors when they see things occurring that shouldn't be occurring, We ought to have management companies required to do a little more on-site work. And they should be permitted just as the owners and the property is. And we should be in the position to remove their permit or for certain situations remove permits for things. Finally, in referring to the two comments from Mr. Edwards and Mr. Greenbaum about the two previous speakers about people who rent in private homes. I was a host family person for a Chinese graduate student in the late 90s.
Ask you to wrap it up on that
that's
final
why
point,
this is
Mr.
my
O'Connor.
last comment.
Thank you.
On the door of the apartment, the condominium in a certain location was a thing about saying how many dogs and cats were in the apartment. What the little notice on the door didn't say was that there were also 2 Chinese graduate students in the basement with windows that no human being could have gotten out of in a case of emergency. So there is a problem, and this does not deal with it. This bylaw is not ready for prime time.
Thank you very much. Before I take the next comment, I would call everyone's attention to the rental regulation conceptual approach to violations and penalties. This is a document that is on the back table. For those of you who are not with us from 3 to 5 this afternoon, this was a document that was discussed in detail and will form the basis or inform a new draft of this, a more fleshed out draft that will be posted on the website late this week and mailed to the working group late this week for discussion next week. So that will be added to the draft you see before you. So let me move on to the next comment. Yes, sir.
Richard Gold. Vince just talked about a lack of management oversight. A lot of what you're doing is just going to be ignored, so it's not toxic. But there's one aspect of what you're doing that requires management, a lack of management oversight, and that refers to the 4 unrelated. If you have a 6-bedroom house, and there are probably 50, 60 of them, each with a legal 6 bedrooms with adequate floor space, adequate windows, adequate ceiling height. If you only rent to 4 people, you only have 4 names on the lease, 4 security deposits, 4 parent guarantees, there are going to be 6 people living there or more, and you are going to lose control of your house. You're going to not have management oversight because you are required by the self-certification checklist and probably by your application form, which we haven't seen yet, to indicate the residency, occupancy, and to have your lease available. So you make the 4-bedroom, 4-person lease. Each one will pay a lot more than they normally would, but they'll be collecting from 2 more people. The state sanitary code deals with occupancy. You're supposed to have a certain number of square feet per person, and that should be adequate. What this 4 unrelated, you can't just ignore it, because by certifying, you're inviting a lawsuit. Someone with 6 bedrooms, maybe he's just going to say, instead of how many bedrooms, he's going to say, meets state sanitary code, and that's going to be a flag, and then the inspectors are going to say, wait a minute, we don't want to give you a permit, and then you're in for a lawsuit because you're discriminating on the basis of marital status. You're not allowed to ask the tenants if they're married or brothers or sisters or how they're related. You just have to assume. So it's really, your hands are tied. You're not allowed to ask anybody about their relationships. So I think you really have to address the 4 unrelated thing, or just say that your unit meets the state sanitary code, and leave the 4 unrelated out of it. That'll be for some lawsuit with 6 monks living in a house, and we'll see how that goes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, additional hands, yes.
Denise Barbaret, 67 North Whitney Street. I apologize for the voice. There's nothing I can do about it at this point. I have rented at that address for the last 20 years. And I just wanted to follow up on Mr. O'Connor's comments and also on the first speaker's comments and ask formally, is there a renter on this committee? None.
There is currently not.
So none of you will be directly affected by the regulations that you are crafting. Correct? Okay. All right. So, the principal problem that this committee was asked to deal with is basically a quality of life issue, which is the out of control behavior by tenants, often undergraduate students, but not exclusively, in family neighborhoods, often in single-family homes, which are owned and managed by LLCs, which are limited liability companies, which are limited liability corporations, which sometimes are a single individual who has created a number of these LLCs. What people were looking for was a permitting system which would basically apply some measure of control to what is out of control behavior in family neighborhoods. But it sounds like from what I've heard tonight that that is not going to be possible. When you say you want a permit that is easy to get and difficult to lose and cannot really be affected by tenant behavior, but only by egregious behavior of the landlord, then that makes me wonder, what are we doing here? It doesn't sound like it really addresses the problems that people want you to address. And I think that is a real serious problem. A lot of the things that you've talked about, the landlord needs to know only 4 unrelated persons. The landlord needs to make the tenants aware that they will be subject to fines if they have alcoholic gatherings, if they're a nuisance house, so on and so forth. These are things that people can already do. They don't need a whole framework of regulations to make them do so. It's very concerning that essentially people ask for a permitting system to control behavior, and it sounds like you can't really do that. It looks like a lot of what this document is looking at is exterior and interior appearances, surface things of the particular properties in question. Does that do anything to control unruly behavior? Possibly, but I don't think it's very probable. And what you are doing in addition to that is that rather than focusing on specific properties and specific individuals, either tenants or landlords, that you know to be a problem, you are casting a very wide net and you are sweeping up approximately half the population in town, renters, regardless of behavior, between the ages of 18 and 88. Essentially what is going on is that the town is expanding its scope of vigilance, and what will happen is that this will divert its attention from addressing the problems that everyone knows about, that everyone can see driving by on the street, and that everyone can hear, particularly on the evenings of Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So I would urge the committee that rather than casting this wide net to sweep up people who are not the problem, that they concentrate their attention on the problems that people have asked them to resolve. It is going to be difficult. These are perhaps intractable problems, but that's what town hall should be dealing with, to really focus on what are problems and to not go looking for problems where there are none. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Britt Rue, and I live at 315 Lincoln. And I first want to say thank you so much to all of you, and everyone else who's spent many hours doing this. Hasn't been me. I'm just coming today for the first time. About a year ago, the house next door to ours was bought by an absentee landlord who came up to the Zoning Board of Appeals to try to remove the owner occupancy clause for the house and to change the parking limits on the property, both of which were denied. and which within a week, I mean, he came with his lawyer, he made his case, it was denied, and within a week he had rented both of the units in the house. He lives in Long Meadow and doesn't live there. And, you know, they're not following the parking regulations. Okay, sorry. So our experience has been that there has been repeated, blatant, kind of going through the system with no intention of following any of the rules. So after, you know, both of his requests were denied, and then he ignored them, and we came back to town hall and we sat down and said, you know, what happens next? What can we do? And, you know, they very patiently explained to me the many steps of the process that the town will have to go to document the violations and then eventually bring it to court, and then it will be appealed, and the courts, you know, rightly don't like to evict people, so it takes a long time, and by the time it gets anywhere, it's the end, you know, it's a new year, and if there's new tenants, they have to start all over again. So really, they nicely said, there's nothing we can do, because the rules that are on the books have no bite. We don't have any way of enforcing them. And, you know, my next call was to our real estate agent, because we really felt like our only option was to move, which isn't actually an option for us, so we continue to be there. My fear is that, you know, this will be passed and won't affect anyone. It won't affect me. I would hate to have some more rules on the books that can't be enforced or that take too long. It doesn't feel good to live next door to a group of people where you know the owner and the property manager are knowingly violating the laws of the town and don't care. As I'm sure everyone knows, a few months ago, 3 apartments burned down in Rolling Green, and 2 of them were lived in by families, and their children were our students with one of my children. So he came home one day and said, you know what they told me, Mom? They said that the people in the house where the fire started got out and stood outside watching their apartment burn and never went next door to let them know that they should get out of their house. Luckily, they woke up and they got out. He said, I was thinking about that, and I don't think our neighbors would come wake us up. And he really articulated very clearly the feeling we have in our house when you live next to people who they don't care. They are not inclined to follow any of the laws. They're going through the motions with the town with no intent, wasting everybody's time with no intention of following any of them. So I really urge you, don't pass anything unless it's something you can enforce and enforce in a timely manner. Otherwise, you're just wasting everybody's time and doing nothing and leaving those of us in these situations to move. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, if I could, I think it's the intention and the intent of the working group is to move forward with something that is enforceable. And we've spent hours in this room, we've spent hours as a group with the public, with our town council, trying to find a pathway through the myriad of laws and rules and regulations in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to try to find something that will address some of the issues that have been articulated by residents like you and many others, and were included in our charge from the town manager. It has not been easy, and we've heard from people about landlord-tenant law extensively in Massachusetts, or heard from many, many people on that. So we've tried to find our way, and we think we have a document as of 5 p.m. that does not address everything, but does get us some of the way forward. So that's where we are. Yes, way in the back, sir.
Hello again, I'm Steve Bloom in Precinct 10. I just wanted to make one statement. I mean, first of all, I hear all this stuff, and it's like the sky is falling, and in Newark, Delaware, only 1 permit's been revoked. The expert in Newark, Delaware, Roy LaPata, has said the threat of having a permit has influenced behavior in his town to a great degree, which brings me to the point that we need an expert to answer all these people's questions, to assuage everybody's fears. I've urged the committee to hire Mr. Lapata, who's the biggest, one of the he's supervised this in Newark, Delaware. He supervised this in State Park. He gave us a reference for the guy who's now in State College, Pennsylvania. Everyone's like speculating about how, it's like, I can't believe the hyperbola I'm hearing here. All we're trying to do is have a mechanism to prevent people like that landlord that the preceding speaker just spoke about. We're not trying to invade anybody's privacy. There's one in Newark, Delaware has 9 inspectors. We have 1. I just wish people would take a deep breath and really see this for what it is, which is a minimal mechanism to do something. Anyway, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. In the green, yes.
Priscilla White, 318 Lincoln Ave. And I just wanted to say that I, too, have been greatly affected by the purchase of 3 houses, one across the street, one next to me, and one on the corner, within the last year. These were family-owned homes previously and were bought by out-of-town LLC landlord. And I just wanted to make the point, I totally have experienced really the destruction of my neighborhood. And it's stunning to me that a year ago, it was a balance of some owner-occupied homes with rentals, some student rentals, and some family rentals. And the change that has taken place just since last June has really destroyed the quality of life that we enjoyed for so many years. And I want to make one distinction tonight. On one side of me is a 2-family with 8 students and a landlord who is responsible and who I can call, and who I did call 10 days ago about underage drinking and partying and a lot of noise. And he was very responsive and came and addressed the problem. And I feel like we have a working relationship. And that's really very, very different from the out-of-town LLC experience, where the landlord pretends to live across the street from me with 7 other undergraduate students who drink and party all night, and who doesn't live there. And the town is, we're held hostage. The officials can't go in and really address the problem. There aren't teeth, as the other woman said, in the bylaws that allow the towns to address blatant violations by these LLCs who just want to cram the houses full and make double. Why rent to 4 when you can rent to 8? Why, and there's really a difference. And I think I just want to echo the fact that the bylaws really, that you've been working on so hard, it's so important that they are enforceable. And we can, there's really a difference working with local landlords. I'm an owner-occupied home, and I rent to students, graduate students in my house. So I'm a landlady, and I love students, but these people who are coming in and come to every meeting with their lawyers and lie directly to us and are so indifferent to the bylaws. Scofflaw, I guess, is the word, and they make a mockery of our bylaws. So I'm very pleased that you're all working so hard to make these bylaws have the teeth in them so that they can be enforced and that they can have meaning and that we can restore some of the damage that's ongoing in our neighborhoods and really destroying our quality of life. You know, I look out my side yard and there's parties and there's guys urinating as I look out my kitchen window and girls throwing up and open containers and back and forth, and you know, this is my yard, you know, this doesn't, you know, and there's nothing I can do about it. So thank you for your work, and yeah.
Thank you for your comments. I missed this gentleman over here. I'll come back to you.
Thank you. I'm Rolf Karlstrom, Precinct 10. I live at 73 Fearing Street. And I too would like to applaud the effort and the vision that went into creating a group. I just went down, it was up at the top there, Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods. And I think that, again, that's a really important thing to keep track of in your charge. And you've done some wonderful things investigating exactly what it would mean to keep a neighborhood safe and healthy. I think that the underrepresentation of tenants and I think underrepresentation of neighbors is telling. I think your charge is not to ensure the profits of landlords. And I must say Ms. O'Keefe's preamble was not encouraging to hear that we want to make something very easy for the landlords and something that will not be a burden and will not, I hope this isn't the case. I think it was meant to say this is implementable, but it really sounded like that the main charge, which is to maintain safe and healthy neighborhoods, may have been shifted toward something that's really focused on, can the landlords continue to make huge profits on our town? I think that's the purview of the Chamber of Commerce or the Better Business Bureau, I guess the Chamber of Commerce in this case, and this is really safe and healthy neighborhoods. So we've heard some good examples, and we know this is happening. Our neighborhoods are falling apart, and especially downtown neighborhoods, but throughout town, our neighborhoods are falling apart. They're not safe and they're not healthy anymore. I hesitate to bring this up, but in front of my house last fall, a student died. For 19-year-old, I think, student is dead because of the atmosphere and the environment we are creating in our neighborhoods. There are illegal bars, known illegal bars around the corner, and these are contributing to large parties or just incredibly bad behavior. And the town has now, because we hired a security guard, we found out about these bars. We've been trying to find a way to hold landlords accountable for the behavior of what's happening on their properties where they're making huge profits. That has not worked. All the bylaws, et cetera, have failed to have teeth and to have changed behavior. I think this permitting system is the single most important thing that Amherst can do to preserve its neighborhoods. And it has to have teeth, it has to be real, and it has to have, it has to be, I think, linked to the owner, to the person who is making huge profits. It's a commercial business. People have chosen to make money in this particular way. In any other commercial enterprise, we have permitting and regulations. It's a simple thing. It's not hard. And as Mr. Bloom said, we are not reinventing the wheel here. Most college towns have tried and true permit systems that hold landlords accountable for what goes on in their property. Yes, landlords absolutely can be held accountable for the environment and the expectations that they create for their rental properties. And we see that. We have many good landlords in this room who have told us they do not have problems because their tenants do not step out of line. We have other landlords who are not responsible. They're making money with very much less oversight and less investment in that property. So that's the issue here. If it's a commercial business, people are making huge amounts of money and they choose to do that, no one's twisting their arm to do this business, then that should come with significant responsibilities so that it does not impact negatively the year-round residents of this town. So that's, we want safe neighborhoods, we need healthy neighborhoods, we want to be neighborhoods. I think we're facing this choice that down the road, year-round residents, as we've heard, will not be in these neighborhoods anymore. So we're going to lose both the safety, the health, and the neighborhood itself. So what's critical for me in this permitting system is some teeth. This is the step we've needed for years to bring our bylaws, which, and many of them are quite good, to a point where they can actually impact the quality of life in our neighborhoods. So the fines are important. We don't need to get to revoking permits, but there need to be clear fines, there needs to be clear accountability, and there needs to be a clear record and responsibility of landlords to create an environment in their properties that is conducive to the neighborhood or the environment that those properties sit. So I urge you to remember that the name of your group. I know there are a lot of landlords on the group, and I know that the landlord interests have been represented very clearly. I'll just finish up and say that Roy Lapata, as one of the people we've tracked down, has been doing this for 30 years. He's created permit systems that work, have been tried in court, and we came to you and asked you to look at this expert's input. I think as Mr. Bloom said, we don't have to be scared of this. These things will work fine for the neighbors, it'll work fine for the landlords, and it'll improve. These will provide tools to increase the quality of life for the tenants as well, because then we'll have responsible landlords held accountable for what they do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I could say, and I made these comments earlier today, that we did provide the working group, and on the back table are copies of Mr. Lapata's report. We thanked the community group for hiring Mr. Lapata and took his comments under consideration. He reviewed our draft document of about 2 weeks ago quite thoroughly.
Since we hired him, I think you can't take credit for that.
I'm not taking any credit for it, sir.
You made it sound like the town hired him. We hired him.
No, I specifically said we thanked you for hiring Mr. Lapata. If you let me finish my comments, please. Thank you. We took those comments under advisement, as we were asked to do by the community group, and those comments are available on the back table. They're also available in our packet. We are still reviewing those comments, but by and large, I think the consensus of the group was that Mr. Lapata found our bylaws were on track and consistent with what he expected. There were no great surprises in his comments. So I'll leave it at that. There may be more comments on that topic for the 12th of March when we have our next meeting. But we thank you for providing those for us. I'm going to move over to this side of the room if I could. Yes, sir, you've had your hand up.
Thank you. My name is Abu Spozur, 195 West Street, Amherst. Unfortunately, I'm not prepared to talk, but based on what I read and what I heard, I think, first of all, there's no license that's easy, and don't worry about it. It's not going to affect you. So that's not then licensing, what you're licensing from the beginning. So in other words, license is license. And based on our economic law, if any law and regulation is cheaper to break than enforce, people break that law. That's just the law of the economic behavior of individual. So you got to explain what are the problem. I think the problem of this town, there are two major problems. One is we know that we're all talking about this students and the student parties. We're not talking about tenant-landlord relationship. And you cannot segregate the town into this type of tenant and a student and good tenant and a student. You can't do it. Otherwise, it becomes like the way they try to segregate the town and cities based on black, African-American, foreigners, Latinos, and so on. But that's, they didn't want these people come to their neighborhood because they bring their neighborhood, they thought neighborhood would deteriorate. Same thing right now is happening. What's happening? From one hand, we have all these major students, and you guys don't want to tackle University of Massachusetts to deal with this issue. On the other hand, you have from all these taxes you impose on all this land, you make the property unlivable for people that they can afford the rent. And the economic law tells us if you can rent this one and bring it to the, whatever the return is on your investment, People are gonna do that. You can't do nothing. Ma'am, I'm really sorry for it. It's happening to me too. If your two neighbors are renting to a student because they're paying a little bit more, that's the way usually it is. Right now, AT&T, Verizon, the rest of them, they push us any price they want. And we cannot really prevent them by this kind of thing. You can prevent them by creating law and order and enforcement of law. You expecting the landlord enforce the law. Landlord cannot enforce the law. The gentleman that was talking about it, you told me if there's a drinking in this house and the police has come and look at all these people drinking, go ahead and arrest those people. Charge them more. Do something with it. How the landlord is going to prevent that one? Landlord is going to come and say what? Please don't drink? Put it on the lease, don't drink? What do you want to do? I mean, what can you do? It's happening to my own neighbor.
If you could, sir, if I could just ask you to address the working group and
Oh, I'm sorry, because
dialogue with
I think
individuals.
these are part of the working group too. They're all helping.
I realize that, but
So in other words, landlord, you are expecting the landlord become law enforcement. We have police, we have fire chief, we have all this. You need more money for those. You need more police. You need more law enforcement. That's an issue. Then let's start to deal with that. Not making the landlord enforce the law, which is impossible to enforce. I have a case right now myself. I have in one of my property, there are 3 women, they have conflict with the man. And the man is imposing himself on him. I helped the 3 women, I asked the man, please, I'm in a lawsuit for trying to prevent a situation from getting to a really bad situation. And I have to spend over $10,000 and more to just hire an attorney and say, listen, I was trying to do a good thing. I could have just stayed back as a landlord and say, I want to collect my rent, the hell with you guys. Go ahead and do whatever you want to do. I interfere, I said, listen, these ladies don't want you over here. Please, let me help you find another place. You don't have to pay rent, anything. It didn't work. The guy went, and University of Massachusetts backed him up to the court and all that, even against the woman and the case right now in the court. What can I do? And you cannot impose that one to me to go and enforce that one. The other thing, fortunately, I only rent to 4. Let's assume they have another person over there. How I'm going to really detect that person? How are you going to ask me? Oh, I have it in my list. If you can get that guy, put it in court, I'll go ahead and come and back you up too. But what kind of regulation you want to put on the landlord for that? I think if the town cannot fulfill its own obligation, you cannot impose it with the people that they are trying. You can ask them for help. You can see what you can do. You want to raise funds. You want to do whatever you want to do. I would be more than happy to participate. Everybody would be happy to participate. But there's certain things you cannot really prevent. And that's, don't try to make the landlord the bad guy, because the majority of, not majority, a large number of people in this town I know, that they are living based on buying, renting, doing this kind of thing. I wasn't a landlord. I've become a landlord.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up, sir. Just
sure, thank you. That's what I'm saying. That I think you better tackle the problem, bring the problem to the public, and then the solution for that problem would come out much more clear, much more acceptable by everyone, by they try to go around the problem and try to do something which is not enforceable and would not be done.
Thank you very much. Yes, other hands over here on my right? Yes. Thank you. If you could tell us your name.
My name is Edie Howe, and I am an Amherst resident. I'm a homeowner, and I also live very close to a house where we have extremely obnoxious renters, and I am also a landlord. My experience of being a landlord has actually been a very good experience. We've had good tenants. Sometimes they're obnoxious, but generally they're pretty good. And I have 2 questions. One is, on page 5C, it refers to the complaint and response process. My concern is that there is no clearly defined definition for complaint. Who can make this complaint? Is it a town resident? Is it an official? How serious is the complaint? Is it trivial or is it urgent? I have really enjoyed our renters, and I feel that I want to protect their interests. I think it would be extremely intrusive for a trivial complaint to be made and the expectation that these renters would open up their home to a town official without some sort of due process. So I hope that will be further looked into.
If you'd like, I will look to one of our code officials right
Okay.
now, and we can try to walk you through that answer.
Okay?
So how does a complaint come in now, and how might it come in through this program?
I would envision a complaint to come in similar to how it does now. It could be through a resident notification. It could be through another inspector that had visited the site, something that we've seen while visiting another property. So there's a variety of ways for the information to come to us. What you see here as far as our limitations on access, if the occupant isn't inviting us in or making the complaint themselves, then we may be limited on how much information we can collect, but we would make the effort, as we always do. We respond to complaints, even anonymous complaints now. We do try to gather some information and decide if there's any validity to that complaint.
And it seems in my mind that there should be some criteria in terms of defining what is a legitimate complaint. And it just seems very broad and open, and I guess I just wonder, could that somehow be violated in a way that was really not protecting the interests of renters? And that would be my question, and I just think it should be further defined.
Okay, we appreciate that comment, and
Okay.
we'll take that under advisement. Did you have another question?
I do have another question. It seems that there are a lot of really great renters, and that there are a small group of really difficult renters. And what I don't understand, which I probably should understand, is why the police department feels like they can't enforce greater fines, or why we can't make it why we can't impose greater discipline or greater punishment for the very small number of people that are causing such difficulty in our town. And maybe the police officer can comment on that. I don't.
We either. Yes.
I'm taller.
Okay.
I would look to our.
Go ahead, Tim.
I said I'm taller.
When an officer when the police department receives a complaint, they respond, and then based on the behavior or what actions they find there at each specific complaint, then they take a variety of actions, and it can be anywhere from a verbal warning to a citation to an arrest and citation. So each individual complaint is different, and there are a variety of circumstances that lets an officer have discretion on how he responds to that incident.
I guess what I wonder is if there are huge parties and they're keeping everybody up in the neighborhood and there are people peeing on the lawn, why can't fines be imposed? Why can't those behaviors be punished? It seems like we're creating a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of paperwork, a lot of tension in our town between renters and landlords in the town. And it just seems like that the people that are violating, they're in violation and offensive to others, should somehow be more greatly punished. And I just wonder about that. It feels like that hasn't been possible, and I wonder why.
They are greatly punished, in my opinion, and but we do have limited resources. If we respond to a noise complaint that has, 100 or 200 people at it, we're pretty limited on what we can do because, one officer, one arrest, and that officer is taken off the street for over an hour. So typically what the officers will do will try and target the residents of the house so that we can take action against them and disperse the party. So
I really appreciate what the town does in terms of responding to the immediate problem, but I think my question is more in the fine area. We had some tenants, when we were sort of new at this, it was some young men. They were very boisterous. They had a party. It was very offensive to the neighbors. We got a notice from the police department, but no fine was imposed on us. We were just sort of a warning, and I think a fine was imposed upon the renters because they went to jail or something. I don't really remember the particulars. But my sense, and I would be willing to pay this as a landlord, is that if my tenants are not able to be managed, I could pay a $500 fine. And I feel like that would be much fairer and a much cleaner. I might impose part of that fine on my renters. But it feels like in that way, people who are really a problem get punished as opposed to everybody suffering. And I'm not sure why that hasn't been more pursued. Like, can we impose very heavy fines?
we're restricted on the amounts.
And why is that?
It's a state law.
Oh, okay, so you're bound by the state
We are
law.
at the maximum. That's a $300 fine. So,
Okay, well, that's a really good answer.
All right.
There's something you can do. Thank you.
If I could, before you leave, just in terms of the fines and the penalties, I think if you read the outline that was provided in the back, and that'll be online very shortly, probably as early as tomorrow, you may have missed today's conversation where we went into some detail on violations and penalties. The idea is that we're currently working with is to have a broad-based registration system, and fines and penalties would come later in the process after a code official had worked with a landlord and in some cases a tenant on bringing that situation into compliance. So anyway, I urge you to look at that document as it develops.
Right. I mean, I did read this document, but maybe I missed the sheet that you're referring to. I think
You
this
may have
just
missed
feels,
the one
I think I
pager
did
which
miss
was
that.
on
Yeah.
penalties and
I
fines.
think it's unfortunate that the state of Massachusetts doesn't allow us to find more, because in my mind that would really change things very quickly. And because it really is just a few number of people that are causing so much trouble for everybody.
You know, I would just add that, you know, there are multiple times where multiple residents get multiple tickets, so, you
It
know.
adds up.
Well, and it hasn't been well, I won't say it hasn't been a great deterrent, but we're still responding to a lot of noise disturbances, not necessarily at the same locations, because there are provisions in the current nuisance house bylaw where the landlords would be fined, and we haven't reached that criteria yet. So there are provisions there. We just haven't reached those yet.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your specific comments on the draft that we're working on right now. So any other folks who have those kinds of comments, by all means. Yes, sir.
David Mazer, 27 Woodlot Road. I have a comment specific to the current draft, which is section 10 related to parking. And based on comments that I think that were made tonight, basically with parking, we are allowing the existing parking that homes have. They're all built with driveways. Really, the cost of a site plan, which is going to have to under the current plan, everybody's going to have to create a document that's a site plan, even though they already have parking. We know we don't want people to park on lawns. That's against existing regulations, and it's going to be included in this document. It seems to me the only time you should require a site plan is when somebody wants to create new parking. You're going to say, you have to show me where you are going to put it. But to require everybody to develop a site plan, if that's what I read the document as saying, when we already are in essence going to improve them anyway, is just giving them an extra cost without actually bringing any result, because we're already automatically going to improve it. They have driveways. Driveways are paved. That's sort of by definition in here. So we're just going to really more logical to just say there has to be a site plan if there's an expansion of existing, not existing parking, but creation of new parking. Other than that, you don't need a site plan. By the way, you can't park on the lawn or unpaved surfaces.
This is an excellent point, and I'm going to turn to our building commissioner, Rob Mora, to walk us through this section. We spent a lot of time on this, and we think we've made the quote site plan quite simple to do, and Rob, a meeting or two ago, walked us through how easy that is to do using our GIS, which is a free program that anybody with internet access can have access to. So Rob, maybe you could just walk us through where we are in this section.
Sure, and those are exact conversations that this group has had over several weeks, and that's just it. What Dave said is that we've tried to make it as easy as possible. GIS is a great tool. It's a scalable plan that can be created, and it can be as simple as hand drawing or marking up the parking locations so that we have that baseline information with the permit, number of cars being parked, trying to identify if the space seems to appropriately fit the number of cars being proposed, and again, just to have something so that when we're responding to complaints or conducting any investigation, we have some kind of information on what we know the property owner expects from on-site parking management and where to start.
I do want to add one more comment on the parking issue. And I think people have brought up issues of sort of, in essence, selective enforcement just as a concept. That you're here we're talking about renters, but basically what we have is homes, rental units. There are many people, some people own old farmhouses, some people have other houses, and they have parked on dirt spaces behind their houses. They've used those for all kinds of purposes. Nobody's really ever been inconvenienced because it's out of the line of sight of the street. People who are abutters don't see it. So I just want people to consider that. That's been something that, people have a car on the front lawn. That is something that has always been objectionable. It's not that it's never happened, because people sometimes are selling a vehicle or something. But traditionally, people have often parked on spaces that, maybe they have an extra car that they only use during the summer or something, or they have a motor home or something, and so they put it behind their house. If you're going to restrict that with rental properties, then you really need to enforce that with everybody. And we have traditionally allowed people to do a lot of that. I've never seen anybody drive around and say, don't let your teenager park a car behind the house or something. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dave?
Yes,
Can I
Phil?
just make one comment?
Sure.
Just what I've been hearing. So all the comments are great, and I just want to make sure that people understand just a couple of things, because you weren't here this afternoon and you maybe haven't been here every meeting. So the first thing is, with the exception of the parking, there's not a single regulation that doesn't already exist. It's on the books. We're not up here crafting anything new. So everything relating to how you use your property, whether you are a homeowner or a landlord or a tenant of a property, is already on the books. So we're not crafting anything new. So I just think that's important to remember. With respect to the idea that creating sort of classes of people, so we can't go after certain landlords and not after other landlords, that's not fair or equitable. So the idea here is that the process, as we've been talking about it, which is not yet locked down, and the document you're looking at, actually, I guarantee you, has changed, at least in concept, based on the conversation we had this afternoon. So don't treat that as if that's the final document by any stretch of the imagination. If there's a problem with somebody not doing something appropriate with their property under any circumstance, it's complaint-based in the town of Amherst. Until somebody complains, if you park your car on your front lawn, it's not a problem until somebody complains. If they complain, you're in violation of the law, and somebody can come down and do something about it. Okay, that's the way that works. So the process, as we laid it out, is really very simple, as Stephanie was talking about. Everybody has to register if they're going to have a property that they're going to rent. So Mr. Greenbaum raises the question of, what should be in, what should be out. I think that's certainly a very valid question to consider. So everybody has to register. There's a requirement that when you do that, you attest to these rules that were in the handout, that you're just simply saying, I understand the rules, and I'm going to attest to the rules. And the consequence for not fairly stating what they are, if a complaint is lodged and it's found out that you didn't tell the truth, then there's a consequence to that. And there's a progression. So the idea that we're trying to, turn loose the hordes of the, large bureaucracy to come out and get people is just misstated. The idea is that there's a progression of stuff, which we talked about this afternoon. And the idea is, the goal, to Mr. Carlson's point, is we want safe and healthy neighborhoods. What we want is we want properties that are compliant with the laws as they exist. So if you're compliant, you have no problems. If you're a tenant in a house and you feel like the landlord is fulfilling his or her obligation to you, there's no problem. There's not a problem until somebody complains. And it's not a witch hunt. Somebody complains and you suddenly are out of business and your house is taken from you and shut down. That's an extreme overstatement. So to get to the point where something like that would happen would really be for the bad actors, the people who are just unwilling to conform and to be reasonable and to work with the code people. So you just have to keep the whole thing in context. I think all the comments are really great, but I just want to make sure that you're able to hear all of that, because I know that many of you weren't here this afternoon, or this is the first time you're kind of coming. So thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Yes.
Carol Bash, 205 East Pleasant Street. I haven't been to any of these meetings before, and one question I have is, how is it decided that the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Working Group would meet in a time of day when a lot of homeowners who are busy earning the living to pay the taxes can't possibly join in? First question. Another question I have is concerns the parking. If we're going to propose that landlords have to have paved or surfaced parking spaces for their tenants, in the cases of single-family homes that have been turned into rental properties, for instance, every house that abuts my house on East Pleasant Street, or many houses on Ames Court that were single-family homes, maybe 2 cars were parked there. Now they're being rented to 4 people, 4 unrelated people, all who have cars, and all who are now parking on the lawns. It will make a huge difference aesthetically to a neighborhood, not only having those formerly single-family houses being rented and by several tenants, but also to have paved or surfaced parking being made out of what had been a front lawn in a residential neighborhood. If Agnes Ting, she's already cut down every tree and shrub in her front yard in the house that abuts my house, has let the house deteriorate to a point that it looks like a Appalachian slum. If she decides that rather than putting up a fence that her tenants have knocked down so that they can park on her lawn, if she decides she wants to pave that lawn so that she's in compliance with the regulations that are going to be imposed on her, that makes as much difference to the quality of my neighborhood as having, tenants in every house. Some of the houses are well maintained, and it makes utterly no difference whether there's an elderly couple living in them or whether there are 4 well-behaved young people whose landlord actually maintains the property to the degree that it was maintained as a single-family home. That is not the case for many of these places that are being turned into rentals, and that's a huge problem that I don't see being addressed by the working group. And I think that the aesthetic considerations of what is happening to our formerly single-family residential neighborhoods has to be taken into account, along with all the other problems of noise and puking on the lawn and parking on the lawn. This has lowered my property values enormously since I bought that house 16 and a half years ago.
If I could, I would like to see if we could address by example, your parking example, because I think it's a good one to illustrate how we would look at the current situation and how, let's take a landlord X, let's not call out particular landlords, but a landlord X might approach through application the town of Amherst in applying to apply for and permit a single-family home where the driveway is from 1960 and 12 feet wide.
Right, so through that application process and the plan that's submitted, we might find that only 2 vehicles fit on the existing pavement. So there's a choice there. There's either a limit on that permit on the number of vehicles that can be parked on the property, or the property owner can expand that parking. It was up there earlier, but in accordance with the zoning bylaw, there are a number of provisions, design standards that have to be met when you're expanding that parking, having to do with size, lighting, shape of screening, and in every case there's a very clear limitation on the number of vehicles parked in the front yard setback. That's the distance from the property line away from the street-facing property line back, where only 2 vehicles can be parked there as a maximum. So that will always be in play. and
To-
part of the design standard.
To whom do we complain when there's a house where there are 5 cars parked in the mud that are killing the sugar maples? Whom do we complain? I don't know who owns that house. I don't know. It was up for sale. Nobody bought it, so now it's being rented. Who do I complain to about that?
Well, as part of this, well, certainly. You can talk to Mr. Thompson after the meeting, but yes, in the future, that person's, as part of this program, that person's application and information would be publicly available to you electronically, and you would know who owns that house, who manages that house, if they're one and the same, their contact information or a manager's contact information, and their application would be transparent. I'm sorry? Yes, with the approved parking plan. So I have to say the working group has spent a great deal of time on parking. We've heard extensively from the public. We didn't have time tonight, but we certainly have loads and loads of pictures. Many of us recall one of the members out in the public tonight made a very impassioned plea to town meeting, I believe a town meeting or two ago, about parking. So the working group has taken parking very seriously, and certainly this is not perfect, and there have been some compromises, but we think we have a workable approach here. So
I'm glad to hear it. Could you answer my question about the timing of the meetings of the working group?
I'll do my best. I think there are a number of committees and boards that do meet throughout the day. This is such a large committee that it was determined that this was the best opportunity. We had at one point roughly 18 members of this committee, and by polling the committee, it was determined that late afternoon meetings with public forums in the evening were the best opportunity to capture the energy and the commitment of the entire group. Now, I will say that moving forward in the lead up to town meeting, if the group moves forward and makes a recommendation to Mr. Musanti, he will then instruct staff to bring this to a variety of different committees. The select board will certainly consider this at more than one meeting, is my guess. The planning board, I believe, staff is to be before the planning board on March 20th, so there will be a number of opportunities for input between now and the beginning of town meeting as well. So that's the rationale for our meeting times.
So nobody on this committee has a 9-to-5 job?
Actually, they do, and many of them made commitments to be here. Everyone volunteered to be on this committee. So yes, I see a hand back there. I don't know who it's attached to, but...
Hi, I'm Maurianne Adams, and I'm in Precinct 10, and I live in the neighborhood that is bordered by campus on the one side and downtown Amherst on the other, and we're one of the neighborhoods that has been very affected by houses becoming rentals, and so we feel that we're a bit in the eye of the storm. I really want to say first that I commend this group for the work that you're doing. I see the perfect as the enemy of the good. And I'm hoping that what you're able to come up with now is not the perfect, but is the good enough, so that we can think of this as a work in progress, something that gets improved and worked over time. But since we have no enforceable, formal regulations at the moment, I feel we desperately need a rental permit, as other college towns do, in order to solve the enormous pressure that residents are facing from houses that turn to what I'm really calling commercial rental use. So the first thing I want to ask of this committee as we think about the current draft is to sharpen your distinction between registration and permit. I've heard a lot of confusion about that here tonight. My understanding is that you're wanting everyone who rents, rooms, whatever, as well as having rental houses, to register. And my understanding is that that is going to be fairly simple, direct, possibly online, possibly no fee attached. And the notion of the registration, at least as I understand it, is very different from a rental permit, which has to do with non-owner occupied rental houses. Now, the reason why some of us make a big deal out of the difference between owner occupied and non-owner occupied is that our research demonstrated that the most troublesome party houses in our neighborhood and also in other parts of town did not have residents living in the place, managing the place, keeping the noise down, calling the police if roving parties arrived, and that the non-owner occupied houses, some of which are run by people in this room who are excellent owners and very, pay a lot of attention, but many of which are also owned by LLCs, by absentee landlords who are really not within phone reach when difficulties happen. So the distinction not only between registration and permit, but the fact that the permit goes to non-owner occupied rental houses, I think is an important distinction that people need to understand. A third observation that I want to make is we've said a lot this evening and other times about good landlords, bad landlords. And I think we're really talking about the enforcement and making explicit what we expect by way of good business practices for the commercial use of rental property. Many people who testify this evening obviously care about the houses that they rent. They interact with the tenants. If there are difficulties, they're there. Neighbors know how to reach them. And I think, as I understand this system, we're trying to extend this not only with carrots, but with sticks to people who have really been exploiting the system, who do not have good commercial practices, who are not available for complaints to neighbors, and are really exploiting their commercial opportunities at the price of the equal rights of the neighbors who are not able to enjoy the peace and quiet and sleep of houses that abut them. So we really are having a difficult balancing act here between various sets of rights and responsibilities. And it seems to me that having a permit that in extreme circumstances could be suspended is something that will encourage the more refractory among the landlords to shape up and to really perform good business practices. I have just one very brief example. I saw the code enforcement officer handing his card to someone, the hiring of the code enforcement officer has already made a huge difference in our neighborhood. We had a house on Cosby that was absolutely out of control. Even though it was owned and managed by someone who lives in Amherst, the owners and managers were not responding to any complaints. It was only when the neighbor complainants got to the code enforcement officer went to the owner, landlord, and arranged face-to-face meetings with all parties, including the tenants and the neighbors. Did the tenants then understand that they lived in a neighborhood with people like their parents, aunts and uncles, etc., and they had real people there whom they could respect? Now, that was a good business practice, and I think it happened under the cloud, shall we say, of rental permits coming. So I see the rental permit as an incentive, not as a penalty, and I urge you not to lose the vitality of this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Chad O'Rourke, Pipeline Properties. That was an excellent speech. It's hard to follow up after that. I was actually coming to speak on a totally different topic, and so excuse me if I'm a little disheveled here on the topic I now want to speak on, which is it seems as though the main issue that everyone is addressing, neighbors, landlords, committee, all relates to noise, parties, and aesthetics of the properties that are around here. Now, I mean, I personally feel that a lot of this that's in here is very redundant based on what's already enforceable by the town, state, and federal laws, and really only gets to the aesthetics problems of those properties, and really doesn't hit on the control that us as landlords and owners have over those properties. And I do think that John coming in has been a great asset to the owners and managers that do care about the properties and do try. And that, I think, is the biggest factor, where I think a lot of our efforts and attention as neighbors, landlords, owners, committee members need to focus on, and that is basically the relationship building between the managers and owners and neighbors and committee members and officials, because those are the things that are occurring already. And the lady that just spoke is spot on. We're already seeing the efforts being rewarded here as to those problematic houses quieting down a little bit. And that is, I think, based on the relationships that someone like John Thompson is building with the landlords that do care. There are landlords in this town that do care and want to put themselves out there, and we have a working group essentially of our own. And the problem with that working group of our own is it's already the landlords that care. It's not the ones that don't. And that's the main problem, is that I don't think this set of bylaws is really going to get to that or address it, because once those people move in, we've checked off our list, they're in. We don't have any control over more what they do once they're in there, especially if it's a landlord that's already got through this checklist of items and is gone and doesn't care about the property, doesn't care about the tenants that are in there, or the neighbors, or the neighborhoods, or anything for that matter. So I think that's the big issue. I think we need to find a way to put our efforts to getting together with those landlords and those owners, and building relationships with those people that care, and especially the ones that don't care, and get them to build a relationship, know their neighbors, know their town officials, and have a face and a name to put with those properties. And I also think UMass needs to step up and be responsible. UMass is not represented in this room at all. And a lot, they are, right, I'm sorry. But I think UMass needs to step up and be responsible, because they, as a landlord, they tell us that they're going to take responsibility for their students that come off campus and live in our houses. And even with landlords that try hard and put themselves out there and try to care, there's only so much we can do per what the law allows us to do as landlords. And there are, once it ends where our control ends, then the university has sometimes more control over those students that come off campus. I don't feel that the university is doing anything as well. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed amongst the committee and the town officials, is to get UMass involved and responsible as well. But again, like I said, I think the biggest factor is that we need to get relationship building more so than bureaucracy and bylaws that aren't really going to, I think, go anywhere after that. That's it.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure the town manager and select board chair, we all appreciate your comments about town staff. Certainly John Thompson has been a wonderful addition, but I will say that, some of the changes that Chief Nelson and our health director, Julie Fetterman, and Rob Moore have implemented in terms of our entire inspections team, has really, you talk about relationships. I think they're out there building those relationships and making change with landlords, with tenants, so that we made a lot of progress. I think there's still wide support for a system that is all in one place. And a big part of this is the transparency piece that we currently don't have. So that registration piece up front is something that has been articulated very strongly by people on the working group and by members of the public, that you all, the community, need to know who are those owners, who are those managers out there. And in one way, this set of regulations will accomplish that piece as well, bringing it all in one place: the registration, all of the application material, and the parking plan. So thank you. Yes.
Melissa Perot, Precinct 1. Again, thank you for all your hard work. This is a tough job for everybody. I feel there may be a weakness in what you're doing, in the fact that it's all complaint-driven, and the reluctance that people have in calling in authorities on their neighbors. I think we're fairly ready to call the police on a noise or drinking violation. Seems fairly clear. We've got to find out or know who the people are that we call when there's a sofa on the lawn, or when the trash is all over the place, and I think there's some reluctance on the community, to be the whistleblower on their neighbors. And I don't know how that can be handled to make that easier, but since all the regulation is complaint driven, then it's up to us, the public, to know that and to know who to call and how it's going to be dealt with when we call. And I think that might be, I can't think of a word, but I sort of seeing it as, it may not work just because, you know, he's my neighbor. I've got to get along with him, even if his kids are making a racket or putting the sofas on the lawn. So has any thought been given to that sort of aspect, that first of all, of educating the public that they must call, that this isn't going to work at all unless they call? And I think to make that happen, you probably need to have some kind of reassurance to the public that when they call, it's somehow not going to get out that they're the one who made the call, because that's only going to make things worse.
Well, if I could, we've moved, the working group has moved from a place some weeks ago where we actually had inspections, periodic inspections of all the units, of some of the units. So we're now at a point where we've moved beyond that, and we're now at a complaints-driven system, not unlike many other communities our size. But I would like to maybe look to Julie and or Rob, and I'll start with Julie. I don't know for sure, but I can tell you right now that there's no shyness about complaining, and we don't have the system. Each one of their staffs are full up, following up on legitimate complaints from couches to parking to zoning all over town. But let me turn it over to Julie.
I think Dave has hit on what I think may be confusing people a little bit. Can you hear me all right? Which is that the reason we keep talking about this as a complaint-based system is because initially we were looking at the concept of periodic inspection of rentals, which would mean that just what it says, that we would be going out maybe once a year, maybe every couple of years, looking at all the different rental properties. So the system that we have now and that all communities in Massachusetts have by state law is complaint-based. So we get complaints all the time. Now, those complaints about interiors often will come from a tenant, not as often from a landlord. And as Dave referenced, we get complaints all the time. We take anonymous complaints, we take complaints with names and phone numbers, but we then don't have to, we protect the identity of anyone who's making a complaint. The other piece here, though, that I think is useful is that anything that's out in plain sight, it doesn't necessarily require a complaint. We may not see it, though. So, for instance, I like to say that fire and police are our 24-hour eyes and ears. So when fire and police are out on various calls at night, on the weekend, if they see things, they're letting the appropriate departments know what violations they've seen so that we can then go out and investigate those complaints. So the biggest piece about complaint-driven is that what's inside a home, really only the occupant who's living in there knows about what's going on in there. So I hope that helps to clarify a little bit why we keep talking about complaint-based.
I think complaint-based is fine. I don't have a problem with that. I do think there needs to be some education of the public in terms of them understanding that, and also that you protect their identity, and I also think we need to know who to call about what. You know, we're not going to just have the police number on our phones. We've got to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different places to call and look at what goes under their category.
I think that's a great point, and if this system, this document moves forward to town meeting and the process is followed through, then certainly an education piece broad education piece for residents, for landlords, for tenants would be part of the process. So I think that's a great suggestion.
Thank you.
So I want to be cognizant of our time. We hope to wrap up here at 9 p.m. So I'll look to this gentleman. Yes, sir.
Hi, Christopher Summer. I'm a nervous speaker, so just bear with me. My biggest problem is, again, there's no like renter or tenant representation, which makes me a little bit nervous about what's going on in here. The idea of trying to deal with a very select problem with a very large net, like trying to swat a fly with a shotgun, is definitely worrisome. I've lived all over Amherst. I've been in the center of town on Pleasant Street. I've been all the way out in the outer rims and farmhouses. I really like the area. Some of those houses have had essentially dirt driveways, not really paved, but that's been fine. It's been that way for a long time. It would bother me if suddenly the landlord had to come in, move all the cars, pave. That would be very bothersome. And additionally, there are spots on there that have always been there, but maybe it was only zoned for so many, and they would have to like change it all up again. But it's the way it's been. Also, with the limit of renters in a house, like there are houses with 5 bedrooms, plenty of floor space, but you're only allowing 4 people to live there, is very bad for people that are not exactly earning all that much money. Independent artists, low-income earners, these are all people that need to live in houses where they could have 5 people if there's room for 5 people, or 6 people. If the house is big enough and has the floor space, I don't see why we want to limit it to 4 individual people living in the house. Otherwise, the rent becomes prohibitively high, and you're driving potential housers of Amherst out of Amherst. I had to live in Sunderland one year, and it was a very nice place. I enjoyed it, but it was nothing compared to Amherst, and that's because I couldn't find a house that I could afford because they were limiting the number of renters in the house to 4. But it's these kind of really widespread ideas that are going to affect people that live in areas where there are no problems that really worry me. And I definitely understand that there are problem areas. Like, I lived on North Pleasant Street in the middle of Amherst, and there are large gatherings of UMass students. I lived up in, someone here represents Puffton Village, right? I lived there. It was wonderful, but across the street from there were large parties going on in the houses across the street. It was a problem, but again, targeting those places is one thing, but targeting everywhere because of those places is just, it's bad, it's unacceptable in a lot of ways. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight. Yes, sir.
I am a landlord in Amherst. My name is Tom Crossman. I have a lot of things to say. Very difficult to get it in 3 minutes. Just wanted to touch on a couple things. One is the parking situation. Every car in the United States of America has a license plate on it, and it's registered to somebody. I think it would be a good idea for them to take responsibility where they park their car or where their car is parked, whether they drove it there or not. I don't think the landlord or the homeowner should be responsible for paying a fine no matter how much they educate their tenants there when their tenants' guests come to the house and park on the lawn. I don't think the homeowner should take responsibility for somebody they don't know. I think another thing that could be a problem, this is just an idea that I have not heard yet. Large gatherings happen. We're living in a day and age that no one's ever lived in before. There's a platform called social media, and all it takes is one person to say, I'm having a few friends over for a drink. They post it on a social media platform. That one person turns into 30. I think things multiply a lot faster these days. So sometimes the tenants have a party accidentally, and they end up with a large number of people they don't know, and they're nervous about calling a party on themselves. I have had that experience. And then I had another point that I can't remember. Sorry. Help me out here. Yeah, no. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you. I'll call on you again because you only used up 1:52. So if you think of it, come back. No, I'm going to try to get to all new, just one, and if we have time, we'll come back to people for a second time. Yes, you haven't spoken in the back. Yes, in green.
Hi, my name is Carol Albano. I'm in Precinct 8, and I've been, I think, to almost all of the meetings of the group here. And I am a landlord of one property, okay, plus my house. But I have a lot of concerns about costs, both to the landlord and costs that are going to be passed on to tenants as a result of these regulations. A lot of the regulations are clearly already things that are on the books and already, are things that can be enforced. And what is happening is we are creating a big layer of bureaucracy. And it's going to take money to administer this and to pay for this. And I have a big concern. I mean, my two properties already take more than $15,000 in property taxes. And now you're going to hit me up for more money to pay for this bureaucracy, and we already have a lot of the ability, we already have a lot of these laws, especially sanitary code laws and so forth, already on the books. We're already set up for enforcement, and now we're setting up another whole bureaucracy. I'm really upset about that, and about that redundancy, by the way. And that is the kind of thing that drives up costs of living in this town, and the costs of living in this town, if they're high, that also keeps families out. You want families in here, but this is going to create more costs for anybody that is renting. If they're going to have to pay now, all of a sudden they're going to start having to pay $150 and more dollars. This is a very punishment-based system. So if I understand you're going to work with people. I've listened for many, many hours about how we're going to try to bring people into compliance. But the root of this is punishment, and it's okay. It's like, but we're set up now so that we have a nuisance bylaw, and if people are misbehaving, they can get hit with first a warning and then a $300 and then escalating costs for that. If there's a problem with the safety of the property, the Board of Health can come in already and they can take care of it. And they do take care of it. If there's a problem with the building code, we're already set up to handle it. And so now all of a sudden we're going to have this redundant system, and that's the expense of it is really concerning to me. And then we're also looking, you're setting up all this, there's going to be some expense probably in litigation. You're going to create this whole system now, and you're going to have to litigate different things of it. And, and that's going to cost additional taxpayer money if there's snags with how this is enforced, and it's not completely handled in an even way across all peoples. There's a lot of discretion in it. And just the discretion, although it's really good in some ways, it's bad in other ways and creates opportunities for litigation. And then the last thing that is of concern to me is just, and my tenants, and talking to my tenants and, talking to them along the way about how you were first talking about doing inspections for everyone, and now we're moving it to complaint-based and everything. And they're distressed at the idea of, they talk about the Fourth Amendment rights, and I think in some ways they're right. Having people come in and do more inspections is an invasion of their privacy, and a lot of the transparency, although I see where the transparency can be good in in having a system like this, you know who the owner is and you know who to contact. I'm all in favor of that, knowing who the owner is, who to contact in case of complaint, creating situations where people are in communication and can problem solve and work together. But it's a little concerning if there isn't a sanitary code violation or if there isn't some dangerous situation, the idea of additional inspections, it just feels like it's just a little more invasion of privacy than it should be. So those are my primary, oh, and there's another thing. I'm very concerned about the landlord being held responsible unfairly under a lot of the scenarios, and it's been clearly stated by the working group that the landlord is going to be held responsible no matter what the tenant is doing. If you have a tenant screaming and hollering, I can't control that. As I think Pat said that once, and I was like, that's true, and I had that situation once. So I am concerned that the landlord, there's potential anyway, for the landlord to be held as the responsible party unfairly. I'm concerned that our property values will go down. There's concerns that have already been given about, you know, bank officials being concerned that if we do the permit system and permits are withdrawn and they know that's a possibility, then they may decide that they're going to charge more to lend money in Amherst because their money won't be as secure. And what was my last thing? So I do have concerns about our property values going down. And I also thought in 7C, there's a lot of vagueness about who can give a complaint about anything they want that will trigger an investigation. I have another concern about number 11, fees. Fees will periodically be raised by the Board of Selectmen. Well, you know, fees go up and up and up. I mean, I'm worried about what the fees are going to be. I'm worried about the costs to me. I'm hoping to use my one rental property as a major piece of my retirement. And I'm very concerned about fees and costs going up. So that's some of my laundry list of concerns.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Tom, did you have one more real quick, because you didn't get to finish, but.
One point that's been brought up is we're trying to go after the problem landlords. A point that was brought up with the town councilman was if you manage 8 properties and 1 property is a nuisance, then you take away the permit for that property, but that landlord is demonstrating in the other 7 properties that they're a completely valid landlord. So now you have a case in point that the landlord is not the responsible party for the nuisance that's at this particular property, but it's the actual tenants in the property that are creating the problems. And then this is a kind of a wild idea, but there used to be this place in Amherst called Frat Row. The reason why I bring that up is it became a central location for people to socialize, to meet, to party, whatever you want to call it. But it wasn't the neighborhoods. It was one location. I'm not saying bring back Frat Row. What I'm saying is bring back some sort of entertainment or destination point for the kids to be entertained. 168 hours in the week, maybe 40 hours they're in school, maybe 30 hours they're studying, maybe 40 hours they're sleeping. There's still 38 hours remaining in the week. We need something for them to do, for them to exhaust their energy. And then Amherst, you know, like we could be a great destination for a music town. Just an idea, just an idea.
Thank you very much. By a show of hands, could I see how many people have not gotten to speak once? Okay. I see in the green scarf way in the back, you've had your hand up for a while. Could you come forward?
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Taub. I live in Precinct 10, and I will be brief. The first thing I just, want to say is we're talking about responding to the speaker who just preceded me, the committee is not suggesting to create a bureaucracy. There's still just one building inspector in Amherst. We're talking about a small fee relative particularly to some of the landlords that have multiple properties. As a percentage of the rent they collect from their tenants, we're talking about a minuscule fee. There are towns and cities throughout Massachusetts as well as across the country. Many jurisdictions have require permits in order to be a landlord and rent property, and those property owners are receiving mortgages without any problem. So the idea that someone won't be able to get financing because there's a permit, if anything, to a lender, it's a show of, it would be reinforcing that somebody is going to be purchasing property and renting in a community that has a permitting system and where the town cares that rental properties are well maintained and well managed. And in terms of property, adversely affecting property values, I mean, nothing is hurting our property values more than the situation the woman talked about earlier on East Pleasant Street, where all the properties around her, trees have been knocked down, properties are in advanced state of disrepairs. There's nothing worse for a homeowner than to become surrounded by you know, absentee homes and student party houses. And the last thing I want to say is all the discussion about landlords not being responsible for the tenants in their homes, nobody's forcing anybody to rent to a house, you know, full of 18 and 19-year-old students. And if that's, you know, the business that a landlord chooses to be in, then they do have to assume responsibility for not renting to tenants who, if you know that they are, you know, week in and week out going to be violating the bylaws and the behavior that's expected in the town. And social media, as the person before me talked about, is a real concern. And the town is saying, and the residents, you know, who live around these student party houses are saying that you need to take some responsibility if you're going to rent a house to people, you know, that, you know, on a weekly basis, on a moment's notice, there could be 200, 300, 400 students coming to a party, and that the people who live next door to these properties, you know, deserve a quality of life too. So we're not trying to make it onerous and punitive for renters or for landlords, but to also understand that everybody in the community has a right to enjoy their property, and that there is a responsibility if you choose, you know, as your business to rent to large groups of unsupervised students. And that's a very different situation than a homeowner who's renting, you know, rooms out in their house, or is renting the house next door, or a second unit on their property. This is really to get to those very egregious cases of landlords who are renting out to large groups of students, often in violation of the town's bylaws. And like you said, or Ms. O'Keefe said, it will be extremely, in Newark, Delaware, where, which is one of the models of a student town that does have a permitting system, in 25 years, one landlord one time did not have their permit renewed. So it's in the most egregious instances, and sometimes just the threat of not having a permit renewed is enough to, you know, have the landlords pay special attention. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to be respectful of our time, all of your time, the working group's time. Are there people who would like to comment, perhaps with a new or different comment? I'm not going to call on people who have already spoken tonight, given the lateness of the hour. I see a new hand in the green. Yes. I think we need to get those folks one time around is probably what we're going to have time for tonight.
Dale Chapman, Precinct 7. I came to a meeting a week ago Tuesday, and I just went home and made some notes that I really want to read. I'll be brief, and I'm sorry it doesn't address the details of the document. But at first I thought the reason for this debate about rental properties was in response to the serious problems of noise, nuisance, even danger that we've had at some rental properties in town, and about people's desire to see a prompt end to these disturbances. But now I'm wondering if this is the real motive or the intent, as you said earlier. In order to solve the problem created by isolated cases of extreme delinquency, the solution that has been presented to us is to deprive law-abiding citizens of their constitutional right to use their own property as they see fit. And it does not even address the problem of nuisance and harm caused to students and town people alike. Members of town have spent endless hours in discussion and reams of paper in describing numerous regulations that in the future will enlarge town government responsibilities and create more bureaucracy, costing the town more money in the long run. Licensing fees will be yet another tax for the very people who are providing a needed service for the town. We already have angry homeowners who are threatening to leave Amherst because of this invasive proposal that poses no solution to the pressing problem at hand. As you said last week, the more excessive and complicated the language of the document, the more opportunity there is for confusion and loopholes. We see that communities all over the country are having this same discussion and passing laws that permit their citizens' privacy to be invaded with registrations and home inspections. Is there a larger agenda to further trespass on personal rights with a pretense of bringing us safety and security? A complaint-driven solution seems to me to be the only fair and reasonable answer to our problem of out-of-control tenants. And I just want to mention, I think the solution with all of the members involved in the discussion that was mentioned earlier with the officer in charge was an excellent way of instructing students, not just punishing people. Just a second. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting where I am. Okay, anyway, a complaint, yes. Probable cause is needed to enter and inspect someone's personal property. Just because a group of people vote to give themselves the right to enter and examine someone else's house does not give them a lawful right to violate the Fourth Amendment. No unreasonable search under the guise of an approved inspection of a house that has never had a complaint raised against it can be justified by any system other than an authoritarian system. I'd like to see us drop the discussion of 100 ways that we can meddle with people's property rights and their rights to do business, and focus on how we can deal with the violations of civility and safety. This alone is a big enough task and is very urgent. Why we would want to busy ourselves with irrelevant intrusions on good people's lives while completely ignoring the real issue, which is the bad behavior of people who show no respect for themselves or their neighbors. Let's not be distracted into over-regulating people and activities without ever achieving the desired outcome of maintaining a safe and peaceful community. Thank you.
Thank you. A show of hands, are there new speakers we have not heard from tonight? Yes, in the front row.
Marie Dash. I've been an Amherst landlord for 40 plus years. I would like to add the word exclusion. If Mr. Tucker is the one who is writing these down, exclusion in the way that just as tonight, we've learned that there are no representatives from tenants sitting on the board so that we could hear what they have to say. But I, as a landlord, know what it's like to be excluded because there have been years when I owned a property at Lincoln Avenue and would ask to be included in the meetings that were going on with the Amherst Fairing Neighborhood Lincoln Avenue group, and wanted to be able to know what they were saying and what kinds of issues were coming up that perhaps I, as a landlord, could address and to make things better. So I sort of feel that exclusion does not make for a healthy neighborhood. That in order to try to address a lot of the issues, you really need to include everybody. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I feel like the town really has to provide a lot of support to landlords, not just to show respect, but to support us. Because there are many times where landlords have gone in on the call of duty when they find out that there is a party that is actually going on at one of their properties. And I, for one, if people know me, will not shy away from getting in my car at 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning if I hear or know, or I will just get in the car just to see, well, gee, this is a warm night, maybe I should go and check. And there was one night when I felt like the Amherst Police Department, this is nothing against Mr. Livingstone, because he's been very helpful many times, but that the police department staff really failed me as a landlord. That when I showed up at the property, there was a party going on by 2 most respectable young women whose parents assured me that there would never be a problem. And there was at least 75 plus people in my backyard, which I was really appalled by. But I didn't shirk from it. I got out of the car, and I immediately called for backup to my husband, who stayed home. And I said, you know, please call the police, because I'm going to need some help with this. And so he did, and I went up to the front door. Of course, the young women stayed inside. They wouldn't come out. But I did say to them, look, this party is over. You have to leave right now, or I'm going to call the police. And I got all kinds of rude remarks. People will spit on you. And these are some people that don't even, you know, belong at your property. But I think the worst part for me was when the police did show up. And the female officer said to me loud and clear, so that everybody who was there said, you need to get out of here right now. You don't belong here. You're invading their privacy. And I really was disheartened by what was said. And I tried to sort of step aside and talk to her privately, and she said, no, you need to leave right now. Well, things finally did quiet down, and the people did leave. But this was an example where tenants will conduct a party. They don't ask you if they can have the party. You try to go and do something about it. And my last straw was to hope that I was going to get the support that I needed, and I didn't. I finally did get it when I went. I was so upset for the next day and a half, and it was the weekend, so I couldn't go to the police department on Sunday. But I did go to see Mr. Livingstone. And I explained to him that I wasn't blaming him. It wasn't his fault. And he wasn't even responsible for how this particular police officer talked to me. But I did ask, and he said, and I think he did follow up to say that it was unacceptable. But it didn't make any difference, because the real issue was that that night, as a landlord, I needed the support of the town and the police department behind me for going in there in harm's way and getting that party stopped. And I didn't get that help. So what I'm sort of saying to you, you know, as board members is, if you're going to impose a lot of these fines and regulations, and especially if you insist on blaming the landlord for that kind of behavior, then you need to provide us some really strong backup to take care of these kinds of issues. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm going to take 2 more comments from folks. If there are folks who have not had a chance to speak, yes, sir, in the way back. You have not had a chance to speak, and I'll go over here and.
My name is Mo Malek Niaz, and I'm a UMass graduate. I graduated 33 years ago, back in 1980. And UMass and town of Amherst, they were, you know, was totally different from now. What you see today is not 1980s of Amherst, 1980s of UMass. I have attended a number of these meetings, 3 to 5, and I haven't heard a peep from UMass. I don't know where is UMass. UMass is a giant-sized piece of puzzle, and I don't know where is that puzzle. And nobody's looking for that puzzle. Do they provide any training about the bylaws and what to do, what not to do when they push their student out of dormitories? This whole situation with the students is created by UMass. I don't think anybody can deny that. I don't know where is UMass. What is their opinion? What's their responsibility? If you are imposing responsibility, levying responsibility on everybody else here, where is UMass? I haven't heard. Have you? What's the UMass position? Do they have to provide any training before they push 19, 18 years old out of their dormitories?
I don't know if we're prepared to answer in detail, but I do know that the select board and our town manager have ongoing discussions and are working closely with the university on a number of different initiatives. The focus of this working group has not been on the university's role. I could defer to Stephanie or John on
But
more
David,
specifics.
university is the source of
Yes.
this problem.
Perhaps if
I mean, can you go to the hospital and they tell you with no regard to the source of your disease, they're gonna treat you?
let me look to our chair of our select board.
Can't answer that question, but so I'm not a spokesperson for the university, but I can tell you that coincidentally, another thing that happened this evening was a rental training program at the university for students moving off campus. That was also going on tonight. I will note that the university actually has pretty extensive rental training that they are looking to expand even more. So I won't go into detail on this, but I would encourage folks to contact the university for that kind of information. I think you'd be really impressed with what they're doing and what they're trying to expand it to. So currently they're reaching hundreds of students per year. It's going to be thousands of students per year because of it, they're making it an online system that's really very robust and should make a big difference. While I have the mic, I do want to just take one opportunity to say, referring to the whole authoritarian thing, whatever happening before, not a single thing in the regulations has changed regarding inspections, not a single thing. The whole thing about complaint driven or whatever, that you are just as liable to an inspection under these regulations as you are today. So not a single thing has changed there. So if you have a complaint about our terrible authoritarian system, it's the same one in existence today. Nothing has changed with that with the regulations. And I also want to say that we did try and get students to be part of this group, and we were unable to. That was not an exclusion. It was just a failure to be able to get students through the university. We tried many times. It's very difficult. I serve on lots of committees to get student involvement because of their schedules, but we did try to get several students, and that just fell through. So just a couple points that need to be clarified.
And the second part of my comment
So-
is,
If I could, Vince, please, this gentleman has the mic.
the second part of my comment was, town of Amherst, I have lived in this area for the past 40 years. I'm a UMass graduate. I know what is UMass. I know how many students they pushed onto our communities 30 years ago, and I know how many students they're going to push in the future to this community. The community in Amherst is not the community that we had back in 1970s and 80s. This is a totally different community. UMass has grown probably 3 times the size of the UMass that was back in 1970. I don't know, people in Lincoln Avenue, probably they have to find a time machine and go back to 1980s or 70s to have the same comfort level.
I think we all appreciate.
The fact is
yes.
that this town is different, UMass is different, UMass is creating the problem. Where is UMass?
Thank you, sir. I think we all
Thank you.
appreciate your comments. I'm going to take one more. There's, yes, the woman in red.
My name is Ann Burton. I live on Dana Street. I am neither a landlord nor a tenant, but I am a person who lives in a town that is in great danger of not staying a town. This town is likely, as some other college towns have become, a place of bars and tattoo parlors without people wanting to live in it. And as I sat here and listened tonight, I came up really, rather than having a comment, with a question. The first thing that I heard was that permitting would be easy to get and difficult to lose. I would like it to be easy to lose. I would like to see people, landlords, perhaps can't do very much once their tenants are in except to wave their fingers and say, you're not supposed to do this. I mean, those that want to be responsible. But if year after year, a landlord's property is filled with the kind of students that are nuisances in the town, then the landlord should lose a permit. I don't really understand the concept of the permit being difficult to lose. I think it's possible for a town to say, no, we draw our line right here, and we tell you that you are no longer welcome to conduct business in this town. You have become a nuisance by virtue of the fact that now I know the landlord's going to take the town to court, and the town is going to have to spend money. But, you know, I lived in New York City for a good part of my life, and I left there when it became a really ugly place to live. Lots of good citizens left. It is now a very pleasant place to live. Expensive, but pleasant. And one of the things that made it pleasant was that there were mayors, a series of mayors that said, no, we cannot accept little infractions. If we stop the small infractions when they begin, then we won't have larger ones. And I see this town as a town that really is bending over backwards all the time to protect everybody's interest, but nobody's protecting the town's interest. I was a college administrator. The college can't do much about what happens off campus, but the college could certainly behave responsibly by not deciding yearly that they're going to invade a tiny town with 10,000 more students when there's no place for the students to live, and the college has no plan to build dormitories for them. So I think that this business of trying to understand everybody's problems and make sure that nobody's ox is gored, well, we are going to wind up with people not wanting to live, I mean, ordinary people not wanting to live here. And I think that maybe a permit has to be difficult to lose if you have somebody who over and over and over again flouts the law. No more comment.
Thank you very much. If I could, I'd like to bring the public meeting to a close tonight. I would like to thank the working group. They've been here. Most of them have been here since 3 p.m. I would encourage you all to come if you can next Tuesday from 3 to 5. We will be talking as a group about additional public meetings down the way. As I mentioned, we will be talking to the planning board in March. The select board will be taking up this topic. There will be other opportunities for public comment. Thank you very much.